This is Andrew Rochford, host of the Rochford Files, here on YouTube, and also additional live streams on Twitch as well. And for my apologies once again for skipping out on another stream yesterday. And to make up for that, I will be shooting some clips to get y'all through the weekend. So with that being said, over the past couple days, there's been a falling out on Twitter between Chelsea Manning and Glenn Greenwald. And it's a point to point out the consistencies and principles that people on the left are showing based on how they view this thing that's falling out here. Let's start with Chelsea Manning first. She had a little tweet thread on Thursday. Glenn Greenwald, I don't have $10,000 right now, but if I get it, I want to send it back to you from a donation you once did. I can't deal with this anymore. I'm terrified of you and everything you do. You're greedy, unprincipled, and I'm embarrassed for ever considering you a friend. Last night during the floods, I decided I'm no longer going to be afraid of saying what's on my mind anymore, or taking a stand from the people that I once considered allies, or who have chosen to bash, harass, humiliate, and lie to get ahead. To those he has hurt, I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. I was scared, and that's my fault. So first off, I'm just going to say this right off the bat. Chelsea Manning, even though as a whistleblower, she was never someone who had the ideology of being real left. That to say, however, she is like in that sockdam circle. So it is interesting how she's suddenly picking now to turn on Glenn Greenwald, that is. So let's get Glenn Greenwald's response in now. Friendships that depend on political agreement were never friendships, just cynical transactions. When she was in prison trying to repeatedly kill herself, I was one of the only ones who visited, spent hours on the phone raising money for her. No good deed goes unpunished. Anyway, sometimes people are nice to you as long as you're of use to them and provide them things they want. Then they turn on you when you can't or won't any longer. As long as you gave and defended them with the right motives, as I did, your conscience should clean. Lots of people on the left, but not many, mistake friendships for political agreements, such as when the political agreement erodes, for them the friendship does too. Friendships don't transcend politics or require political agreement have no value. When Julian Assange is rotting in prison, Chelsea Manning recently smeared him when he couldn't defend himself, announcing that she had to do it over again, she would have not leaked to WikiLeaks. Maligning someone unjustly rotting in prison is not an attribute I value. Then he adds a tweet from Aaron Mate in the mix as well, calling out Chelsea Manning just for smearing him in a June interview on The Intercept, which included Ken Klippenstein. Then next, Greenwald says, anyways, as I've long said, this is what left liberal spaces have become. They all turn on each other, denounce each other, repudiate one another. Their currency is this form of self-victimizing grievance. So grateful I'm not captive or dependent on it. Then he adds a thread discussing how left-wing spaces destroy themselves, which he was largely right back on that thread on August 18th. Then, as I'll show you later on, he's going to release the complete communications between him and Chelsea Manning. And lastly, he points out how Chelsea Manning made an appearance at a pro-Trump gala. And he hasn't spoken to Chelsea Manning since 2018, but she posted accusations today claiming she's terrified of me, insinuating I abused or threatened her. To refute that, reading all our communications since 2016. And her only grievances are about her politics. And I'm about to go over that in a bit, but it's important to break down the tweets from his thread before that point. First off, this feels like to me Chelsea Manning is now making a shift back to the right now that she no longer needs people on the indie left media space like Glenn Greenwald and Intercept, for all intents and purposes, is really just a rad shitlib publication these days, and they proved it the moment that they tried to censor part of Glenn Greenwald's writing when Glenn Greenwald was the fucking founder of The Intercept. That's why Glenn Greenwald left and started his own Substack instead. And yes, Glenn Greenwald is not a perfect pundit by any means. He has a flair for trying to be overly contrarian when it's absolutely unnecessary, such as a recent argument over like mask and car safety. That was one example of Glenn going overboard with his contrarian streak. But when it comes to being in favor of whistleblowers, freedom of speech, he has remained very principled on that front. And the next point I want to get to is, we saw recently on Twitter that there are Twitter communists out there who don't give a fuck about Julian Assange. And one of their reasonings is they do not believe that his case is critical to press freedom. And the next point they've made is that Julian Assange is anti-communist. So that means we should not give a fuck about justice for Julian Assange and making sure he gets pardoned. Well, if they had that type of consistency and principles, they probably shouldn't have cared about Chelsea Manning. Oh, she's a shitlib, so she doesn't matter. That's the type of whole fallacies you run into when you're not pro whistleblower, regardless of their political ideology. And to me, it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum they land on. All that really counts is the fact that they're whistleblowers. Oh, and what Glenn Greenwald exposed is Chelsea Manning, by showing up at that pro-Trump gala during his campaign back in 2016, is that she's not really as left as she's been letting people on to be in the time that she was trying to get herself freed from prison. Next point to make here is Glenn Greenwald was highly instrumental in helping publish the whistleblowing of people like Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning. But before I forget to work this in, there were a lot of people out there who really thought that Glenn Greenwald was trashy for pointing out the fact that he was there to help when she contemplated suicide in prison, and a lot of these lefty shitlib types decided to attack him for that, and it has parallels to the recent Jimmy Dore and Anna Kasparian when Anna was trying to blackmail Jimmy. And the thing with that is, could Glenn Greenwald have been more tactful when trying to point out that detail? Like in the same way Jimmy Dore could have been more tactful in explaining the thing that the incident which Anna was trying to use as blackmail? Yes. But what it doesn't do is take away from doesn't get blown up to the point where it takes away from everything else that Jimmy and Glenn had valid points on when trying to explain their side. So let's shift over to these this message log between Glenn Greenwald and Chelsea Manning. So I'm going to scroll down to the DMs here. So this one was from November 8th, 2016. Hi Glenn. Hello there. Chelsea has been trying to reach you. Do you have a moment? Please signal me at the redacted 415 number. I am the network volunteer that usually talks to you through Andrew. Thanks. Then she shared a tweet for trying to get Donald Trump, well, Barack Obama at the time, to help pardon her from prison, and asked Glenn Greenwald to boost it. And then next, another tweet shared right here, and hello, Chelsea has just published her clemency statement as part of her time served campaign. Thanks for retweeting a comment if able. Thanks. And then next, December 1st, 2016. Hi Glenn, new tweet by Chelsea linking to her blog post, please. Another boosting tweet. And then another tweet that she's asking Glenn Greenwald to boost. December 8th, 2016. Thank you so much for your support during this critical time. And then we'll go to June 16th, 2017. Your interviews and appearances have been so inspiring. I hope you're doing as well as it seems. So thrilled that you are experiencing freedom, the full possibility of your life. XXOO. Hi Chelsea, I'm hosting Jeremy Scahill's podcast show for him this week. Any chance we could talk to you about it for 15 minutes, Glenn? That was Glenn asking. Then Chelsea leaves him on red. Then this is Chelsea Manning doing what liberals typically do when it comes to outrage about people like him and Jimmy Dore appearing on Tucker Carlson or the other right-wing ghouls preside at Fox News. Plan this Tucker Carlson thing is really, really, really off mark. TC is basically organizing as a Nazgul demagogue. You're losing a lot of friends here. Whose side are you on? And Glenn left that on red, and that sounds very familiar to the TYT Intercept Majority Report type of left talking points when having outrage over that appearance. And here's Glenn in December 20th, 2018. If you think that I argued the effort to pressure his advertisers was wrong, you've either been seriously misled or are yourself being dishonest or have difficulty reading simple tweets. Either way, it's extremely disappointing that after studiously ignoring all of my messages for almost 2 full years, you finally decided to speak to me in this aggressive tone that relies on an utter distortion of everything I think and said. Finally, I don't want friends whose friendship is dependent on my agreement with every view. Hope you're well. And that right there is a great point of a lesson that I think the left really needs to take before I go further into reading more of those messages, because too often we let small disagreements on maybe 1 to 3 issues be the point where we cancel each other all too often. And it's generally the side where the Chelsea Mannings are now starting to preside in, rather than the opposite side further to the left with the other people like Jimmy Dore and Glenn Greenwald. I'm terrified, and I'm fighting this on several fronts. Sorry if I'm aggressive, but it's driven by the fact I'm more scared now than when I've seen you last. I read what you wrote, and it scares me because I don't know who's on what side anymore. It's fear. Then Glenn responds, okay, remember when you went to an alt-right party and took pictures of actual Nazis, and I was so furious that people would imply or even wonder if you yourself were a Nazi. That's exactly how I felt when, after 2 years of ignoring me and my messages, you decided to pop up into my messages and implied, based on the thinnest of evidence, that I'm maybe some sort of Nazi sympathizer. Then Chelsea in response, sure, not because of a photo or an association, because of what you're writing and who you're defending. I'm actively trying to deplatform these folks. The right capitalized on an optics error, but everyone knows my position on the alt-right and TC is that they need to be deplatformed. This isn't a debate or a marketplace of ideas. They're using stochastic terrorism tactics. I've spent months working on this campaign to topple TC, and it's finally bearing fruit. I'm going to pop out for a moment to address that, because this is really a liberal type of mindset when you advocate for censorship for some types, and we know how terrible the idea of censorship is. And this is very much like what we do know is, if we are truly about freedom of speech, then being anti-censorship is ideas of the left will win out in the long run, and that of the right will be inferior. That's why I would still be against censorship if it were even the opposite. But the point is, censorship is bad because the people who advocate for it tend to get it worse than the people they demand they get censored. And this goes into another point about how liberals have been trying to cancel advertisers from Fox. And at that point, it's fair do what you want, but when it comes to corporations, you'd have hardly anything really left because you'd pretty much have to cancel literally all the corporations, even the ones on liberal media. So the thing is, then they also try to start campaigns to fire these toxic Fox News personalities. But I asked them, what really is the end game? Because so what if you manage to get a Tucker Carlson or a Sean Hannity or a Laura Ingraham fired? Because there's always another person waiting to take their place. So that's why, to me, the end game of trying to get those personalities fired is stupid. Next, we got, also, you're blocking my comrades who call you out on this. I work with Emily and Shane on a daily basis, and I don't want to get into a public fight over this, but this is concerning. When we started this campaign, no one was talking about Tucker Carlson. We now draw attention to him and his positions. Shane, this is Glenn. Shane lied about my views. He claimed I was opposing the campaign and that I was advocating dialogue with white supremacists. All of that are utter lies. The fact that someone is friends with you doesn't entitle them to lie about me in public or have access to my Twitter account in order to help them do it. I didn't oppose the campaign. I made a general point about Nate's concern that marginalized people might be wary about empowering corporations to determine what is and what is not permissible speech. I explicitly said I wasn't opposing the Carlson campaign. And yes, that point further builds on mine. Well, I don't oppose it per se. I just don't see how the end game or what there is to really gain from trying to get rid of people like that when networks could easily have someone else waiting to take their place. And Chelsea, I feel more from Glenn. I feel conflicted about using corporate power to silence people because it's potential to backfire. Just 2 weeks ago, CNN fired Mark Lamont Hill for giving pro-Palestine speech. Those are hard and complex matters, and people are entitled to discuss them without being called Nazis. Or worse, having people deliberately lie about what you are and are not saying. Right? That's why I blocked Shane, not the first time. He blatantly lied about me. I said I'm not expressing any views on the propriety of the Carlson campaign. He says, Glenn supports Tucker and is against the campaign. Why would I not block a liar like that? And Chelsea agreed, those are hard and complex issues, but when it comes to friend versus foe, you can't have this ambiguity right now. That was my fuck up last year. I inserted ambiguity to my associations and alliances. Vulnerable people were feeling the effects of them, and when you can't identify your friends versus foes, you're basically falling back into assuming that they might be a foe. It's safer to assume a false positive as a threat to ignore a genuine threat. Things are academic right now. They're real and scary, and taking absolute positions runs the risk of you getting dragged, and it's increasingly no longer an online space, not academic. That's what happened with Colbert recently, for instance, when he defended Tucker Carlson. He adjusted a bit in his tone and messaging and went back to doing his usual thing. And yes, depending on corporate advisors is problematic. And it's not even effective since they're not losing any revenue or viewers. But the narrative that gets generated is an end of itself. That means an ends thing. It's war, Glenn. War isn't the space for academics discussions in public. Glenn, okay, well that sounds like George Bush's "you're with us" or "you're with terrorist" framework. In fact, it's pretty much verbatim copying of what he said. And just as I refuse to be bullied into renouncing my own views for being accused of being on the side of terrorists, I'm not going to be bullied into renouncing my right to think about complexities of these issues because people will otherwise lie about my views or accuse me of being a Nazi sympathizer. I'm sorry if unconditional, uncritical, unquestioning support for your opinion is preconditioned to being considered a good person, but I'm not willing to comply with it. You try to deny saying it's not a precondition, and yeah, the with us or against us thing of the shitty thing exists regardless of if the rhetoric is used, is all I'm saying, and that's why I don't say things like that without an nasty goal. It's too fucking gray for the black and white. But Chelsea Manning's coming out in this moment definitely exposes hypocrisy in this message that she put right here. Either way, Tucker Carlson and the rest of the machine can end by any methodical and systematic needs and okay, well, I'm glad you found a cause you feel so strongly about. I appreciate in the future if you not apply that I'm on the side of Nazis, and that you not demand that I honor your friends who publicly lie about me the way Shane did. I don't know who Emily is. Hope you're well otherwise. And she says, Emily G. I'm not implying, I'm questioning. It's fully not clear to me where we set on the political friend-foe scale. I trust you and I know your friend personally, which is why I'm talking to you personally and not on the Twitter cesspool. That's not why how the friend enemy distinction works. Plenty of friends who would currently fall in the category of political enemies. I can have dinner and conversations and drinks and laugh with these people, Tucker Carlson included. Your personal friends and enemies differ from your political friends and enemies. The distinction usually isn't clear until things get heated. Okay, to be clear, I agree with Tucker on some things and find much of what he does is toxic and harmful, which is pretty much how I see most cable news hosts. I think there are worse people on air with big audiences, including Hannity. I confronted Tucker about those problems when I interviewed him, and he referred to an old Medium interview he did. Chelsea said she saw, but I am an extreme long record of writing articles, books, giving speeches, doing interviews, and I don't think I've been clear and ambiguous about my political views. I have a big stack of articles and writing you've done on my desk. Well, I hope not. Chelsea, look, we should talk more often. Glenn says, I'd be happy to. Chelsea, you ignored me for 2 years while you talked to everyone else, and honestly, that was a bit confusing and even hurtful. I'm happy to talk to you anytime. I've been behind the scenes a lot. I haven't kept up with everyone evenly. I did that because of the Reality Winner case. Also, keep in mind, Glenn Greenwald also was helpful with that case and with his reporting as well. Glenn says, you never responded to a single message of mine since you were released from prison. You were ignoring my messages long before Reality went. Chelsea says, that's over now. They're all recorded here. This is the first time you spoke to me since you were released from prison. And Chelsea was surprised, says, really? Glenn says, yes. Chelsea says, I'm a bad friend, I guess. I'm sorry. Okay, I just didn't know if you were angry at me for some perceived slight or whatever. Like I said, it was confusing and hurtful, and I thought we were friends, and then you ignored me studiously ever since your release. Chelsea says, not angry, I mean, yeah, last night I was a bit angry, but that passed overnight. I'm just city and don't keep track. I use Signal mostly. I think Lisa gave me a number, but I don't have it anymore. Okay, well, I'm glad we talked, and it'd be great if we did more often. Glenn gives out his 2 numbers. Chelsea, yeah, sorry it's fucked up. I only reached out when it involved something I was doing and getting mad about. Glenn says, I appreciate that. We can move beyond this now. I look forward to talking again. Glenn, some more. Hey, by the way, as I told you, I don't know who this Emily G is, so I checked. I still don't know who she is, therefore I never blocked her. She has, however, blocked me. And Chelsea's like, why are you telling me this? Just because you accused me of blocking her? So, just want to make sure you knew that this wasn't true, that the opposite was true. She blocks me, but I didn't block her. Oh, okay. Then she repeats that way again, just because you had accused me of blocking her. So wanted to make sure you knew that this wasn't true, that the opposite was true. Okay, can you chill out? You're constantly exchanging potential material gains for your own benefit. I know you're living large and all, but I'm living in a closet-sized apartment in Brooklyn without health insurance. I'm constantly waiting for a break on mass quarantine. You're causing actual material harm, bracing this mad Nazbol eat the left stuff. I mean this not as an attack, but because it's really hurting. I'm just tired. So overall, that to me just sounds like your typical rad lib sock dem type who's now gonna pull out like the red brown card on Glenn Greenwald in addition to this Nazball term as well, because those are two common smears that people in that camp like to use on people who are more principled about stuff like freedom of speech. They're not afraid to do outreach with the right on the issues they agree on, while having the right caution to sever ties on the issues they're divided on. That right there is just how Chelsea Manning has slowly flipped over time, and she has really interesting timing trying to turn on Glenn Greenwald. But it also makes sense because what you know is there's a lot to be gained by turning on people like Glenn Greenwald right now. Because ever since Biden took over and there's been a new line of deplatforming and difficulties with making the algorithm more difficult, it's far more easier to build clout and get more support from like liberals and sock dems and hey, even a few conservatives who are mid-righties who occupy that space right in between the Democrats and Republicans. And this is just a case of Chelsea Manning being frustrated over Glenn Greenwald being principled. Yes, there are moments where Glenn does look more sympathetic to the right, more so than anyone else that gets accused of the Nazball or Red-Brown Alliance shit. But the point is, Glenn Greenwald has remained principled on helping whistleblowers with his reporting. And it doesn't matter whether you're a right-winger, communist, socialist, liberal, libertarian, right, Democrat, Republican, Green Party. Glenn Greenwald, if you will try to help your reporting. However, there's now a new portion who, this is a major problem. They're only for whistleblowers conditionally. Especially when, oh, this person falls within my political camp, so yes, I'm for this whistleblower. Oh, this person's on the right. Fuck him. I don't give a fuck about this whistleblower. He's my political enemy. And this also points out a lot of the left who feels the need to go against Glenn Greenwald. All they're really doing is supporting another person in Chelsea Manning in her post-whistleblower life as she shifts further to the right, while Glenn Greenwald remains principled on his values of freedom of speech, supporting whistleblowers, and being anti-imperialist. And yes, you can be supportive of the whistleblowing work that Chelsea Manning did, but at the same time, also point out that what she's doing right now is shifting to the right, and now that she's freed, you don't have to support what she does after that, but you can still, especially if you think she's wrong going forward, while still pointing out that it was good to free Chelsea Manning at the same time. Because what's really happening is there's too much conditional support of whistleblowers all across the line, and whistleblowers are still very useful to the left, regardless of where their personal politics fall, because the left is supposed to be the most anti-imperialist, anti-war group in the country without having any consistencies or fallacies that expose your lack of principle. So this is all I see here, that Glenn Greenwald, on those main issues I pointed out, has remained consistent over time, and Chelsea Manning is just really making a turn for some reason, which is completely logical, because she said if she had to do that all over again, she would have confided in Ken Klippenstein. The same Ken Klippenstein who leaves some phone number in the past to leak to, which wasn't even a protected source. And The Intercept now has a history of outing their whistleblowers. So that would have probably ended up being a pretty major mistake if she had decided to leak to scumbags like Ken Klippenstein, Ryan Grimm, in place of Glenn Greenwald, because their integrity or protecting of them is less trustworthy and probably would have hurt more than helped. And WikiLeaks has a far more impeccable record on their reporting, so that's why. And even though she could have the regret all she wants, that difference alone may have led to her not being able to get out as soon as she did. So lastly, just stick. You're much better off as a whistleblower going to a source like WikiLeaks or Glenn Greenwald or even the Grey Zone, because those groups are the ones who have who protect their sources better at the end of the day. So this is just nothing more than Chelsea Manning deciding to turn on Glenn Greenwald for their political convenience. And Glenn will still be fine after this. He has really All he really did was expose the hypocrisy and how Chelsea Manning has changed over time.